Hi, this is Hiki with the Lost Samba podcast. Welcome back. Today we're going to speak about the Sertão. The Sertão is the poorest region in Brazil. It's characterized by a semi-deserted area, more or less the size of France. It's very dry, it's very poor. There's a lot of illiteracy. The structure of power, of political and economical power, resembles very much the one in medieval Europe, where you have very rich landowners and the people working for them. And it's almost feudal relationships, so they live as a favor in this rich guy's land, and they have to repay by doing favors. There's also a big honor culture. There are many vendettas, like not only between the very rich but the very poor, for honor. So was a daughter that was taken away or raped, or it was someone who killed someone in the other person's family. And there are these rifts that they go on for generations. Life in the Sertão is very similar to what we see in old Western films, with John Wayne and other people, other actors, in regards that it's a life around cattle. The main product of the region is cattle, and you have the presence or the figure of the vaqueiros, who are the equivalent of cowboys in the Western films. And they are the people who take the cattle from one place to the other. It's a very physical life. So the guy has to be agile, and the best ones, they are rewarded. So in this aspect, it's very similar to the Westerns. The difference is on people's colors. There's a mixture of races: the Afro presence, the native presence, and the white presence. So it wouldn't be like white herdsmen being attacked by Indians or by crazy Mexicans. The main difference between the Sertão and the Wild West is that the people there are very Catholic, very superstitious, in a way that resembles medieval Europe. The presence of the Catholic Church is still very strong, although it's being questioned by evangelical organizations who are going in through the Sertão. And it is worthwhile pointing out that in the past there were several uprisings. In their downfall, they gave birth to the figure of the cangaceiro, kind of a banditry, that they used to steal farms, and they weren't the nicest people on earth, but they had this aura representing the poor and redistributing money in a more just way. And the main figure of this culture, of this tradition, is Virgulino Lampião, who was considered the king of the cangaço being the world of the cangaceiros. And he's pictured in a lot of modern artistry, and is a legendary figure within the Nordeste culture. One big feature of the culture of the Sertão, which, as I said, it's huge, it's the size of France, is the connection with nature. People are still very attached to the old ways. The old ways meaning the ways of the natives who live there, who they kind of bred into this European culture that invaded their lands. They really know what every tree can give them, to the medicines, and where to hunt, where to get things, how to survive in that environment. The rhythm from the region is the forró, the baião, the chachado. Has more in common with the rest of Latin America than what you see in Rio, in Salvador, and in other states of Brazil. In the period that I'm portraying in this podcast, which is present in my book, Lost Samba, the culture of the Nordeste was very isolated from the rest of Brazil because there weren't many radios there. There was certainly no internet. There were very few phones, hardly any television. So the artists, as probably in the Middle Ages, they went from one town to the other, giving what they call bailes, or actually forró means, comes from the word for all. So everybody was invited, and you'd have these balls where people would dance, and this band would play acoustically for the people of the different villages where they traveled through. The instruments, the percussion was different. They use a lot the accordion, which is very European, obviously. That culture produced a lot of big names, right? The main one is Luis Gonzaga, considered the king of Baião, a very typical guy with a very strong voice, and Jackson do Pandeiro, and a plethora of other artists. Nowadays it's very different, but in the time that I'm portraying, there was a big diaspora from the Nordeste, or from the Sertão, that came to the big cities such as Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, Curitiba, Brasilia, that was being constructed, and they created a new market that listened to the radio, that bought records, and these artists such as Luis Gonzaga and Jackson do Pandeiro and all the other artists, they began recording, appearing on TV programs, appearing in films, and they became famous. They became household names. Later on, when the Brazilian artistic scene became very politicized, the theme of the poverty in the Nordeste and the exploitation and the uprisings became a strong presence in the musical production of the early 60s, when Brazil was very political, where there had been the Cuban Revolution was still very recent. Later on, because the rhythm was very catchy, and because many artists had come from the Nordeste, I mean, the whole Tropicalia is basically from the Nordeste, with a few exceptions. Another artist came down from further up north, from Pernambuco mainly, Alceu Valença, Zé Ramalho came from Paraíba, and these are the main names. There are several other names that I could mention, Elba Ramalho. They brought this rhythm down to the south, and it became very popular. It actually spread worldwide with the appearance of forró houses all over the world, and more even in the early 90s, late 80s, with the lambada, which is also a Brazilian rhythm. It's not exactly from the Nordeste, or it's from a part of the Nordeste, but the lambada became very, very famous, and it's related to the culture of the Sertão. So today's song was recorded and was composed by Luis Gonzaga, the king of the Baião, in a phase where he was working with a university-educated writer, a lyric writer, called Humberto Teixeira. And they made a lot of very good songs. This particular song, A Volta da Asa Branca, is a very beautiful song. It's about the rain coming to the droughted Sertão. There's been a long drought. Then a bird listens to the thunder. It flies to the guy's farm, and then the rain comes down, and not only the people are happy, the nature's happy, and he's so happy that he's going to propose to his love interest marriage. So it's a song that's very dear to me, and I hope you like it. Já faz 3 noites que pro norte relampeia, asa branca ouvindo o ronco do trovão. já bateu asas e voltou pro meu sertão. Ai, ai, eu vou me embora, vou cuidar da plantação. A chuva fez eu desertar da minha terra, mas felizmente Deus do céu se lembrou de mandar chuva pra esse sertão sofredor, sertão das mulheres sérias, dos homens trabalhadores. Rios correndo, as cachoeiras tão zoando, terra molhada, mata verde, que beleza. E asa branca canta à tarde, que beleza. Ai, ai, o povo alegre, mais alegre a natureza. Sentindo a chuva, me recordo de Rosinha, a linda flor do meu sertão pernambucano. E se a chuva não atrapalhar meus planos, que cai ao seu vigário, vou casar no fim do ano. Ending the podcast for doing the normal quirk of this episode, I am going to talk about the Peabiru stone. Now, what is the Peabiru stone? The Peabiru stone is a stone that was discovered in Ingá, that's some 3 hours from João Pessoa, the capital of Paraíba. It's way down in the Sertão. And this is a stone that no one knows what it's about. It's full of inscriptions that no one has ever deciphered. It's definitely not from the Incas. The natives there, they called it the stone of the other people, so it's people that preceded them. And it's not Phoenician, because in Brazil there are Phoenician inscriptions. No one knows what it's about. And in my book, there's this psychedelic trip that I did through the Sertão with some friends. This reminds me of a record, like one of the best psychedelic records done in Brazil, of Lula Cortes, who's not very known, and Zé Ramalho, who is better known, perhaps not outside Brazil, but in Brazil he's a big figure. And the whole album, they did it under the influence of LSD. So it's a really crazy album, but excellent, called Peabiru. This stone of Peabiru, it's considered like a national treasure. It's in a preserved area. It's preserved, unlike other places in Brazil that have inscriptions that are not preserved. The Pedra da Gávea in Rio, where there's a head, there's like a head, it's quite famous. There are also Phoenician inscriptions on the sugar loaf, the Phoenician inscriptions, but this one, no one knows what it's about. This shows that before the Europeans arrived, there was a migration from the Bering Strait of the American and Latin American natives. And in Brazil, they decimated the people who lived there. There are the proofs of these ancient people who lived there, which have, I mean, it's barely touched by archaeologists. But there was these people who lived in Brazil. Archaeologists think that they crossed from Africa and they stayed there. No one knows whom. And also, there's proof that the Sertão, before being a semi-deserted landscape, it was lush nature, rivers, forests, and everything. But this all disappeared before the Europeans came. So this is a interesting part of Brazilian history that very few, or prehistory that very few people know. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, and I hope to see you again next week. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.